topic for this hour. Good morning and welcome to everybody. This is day 2 of the ICMA Equity Summit, and we are so excited to have you here today and so glad that you've decided to spend time here with us today. The topic for the hour is the possible side effects and net gain of equity commitment. And as our speaker today, we have Liz Cedillo-Pereira, who is the Chief of Equity and Inclusion with the City of Dallas. Ben Duncan was unable to join us today. She and I will be having a conversation, and we trust that it will be very beneficial to you. Talking a little bit about what today's session is, whether cities or counties are just embarking on their equity journey or strengthening their existing efforts, they are undoubtedly navigating barriers and challenges in the process. Advancing and promoting equity could mean significant culture and narrative shift within the organization and in the community. This can often lead to internal conflict and or relationship challenges. Today's session will explore these conflicting challenges, big and small, and strategies to effectively address them. Before we get into our time, just the basic housekeeping. Keep your mics on mute until you're ready to speak. We will open up for questions and answers at the end of the session, and you can either come on camera and ask your question live, or you can put it in the chat. Also, throughout our time today, you are welcome to converse among yourselves. We want to see that chat move and share your experiences, share your thoughts, share questions, share concerns, and I'll be monitoring that so that we can address things at the end as time permits. And so I would like at this point to turn it over to Liz to do an introduction of herself before we get into the meat of today's conversation. Liz?
Hi there, Tammy. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, coming in clear.
Wonderful, and good morning and welcome from Dallas, Texas, where I am seated. It's really just an honor, a pleasure to be with you all today at ICMA. And I see my friend Benjamin Duncan has joined us,
yes,
so a little bit less
welcome.
Pressure on my part. Tammy and I were going to do it podcast style. We had it all set up, Ben, but so glad we're going to roll with the punches here. But glad to see you, Ben. And I'm introducing myself, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll start the conversation. I think that's how it goes. And again, Liz Cedillo-Pereira. I serve as the Chief of Equity and Inclusion at the City of Dallas. Just want to start off by saying it really is a blessing for me personally to serve in this position as a person who was born, raised, call myself a native Dallasite, and raising my kids here in Dallas as well. It's just an honor really to be in this position at the City of Dallas, where we can all work together internally as city, department, and staff, but as well as hand in hand with our community members to create a path forward for how we envision investing in equity and inculcating principles of equity and inclusion into our policies and practices and procedures and our daily life work culture at the city, and in improving the outcomes that we see for all of our residents in Dallas, with certainly a lens toward equity and looking at how people are impacted by the policies and how people are benefiting and how some people may be burdening from the decisions we make at City Hall. So very grateful again to be in this position. As I said, I'm a Dallas native. I came to this role with many twists and turns. I didn't set out to become the Chief of Equity and Inclusion as my life's career. I am previously an immigration attorney, board certified in immigration and nationality law, and went up to the Obama administration to serve as an immigration policy advisor before coming back to establish a community that's dedicated to immigrant and refugee integration and inclusion at the municipal level. So that's how I found this trajectory toward equity and inclusion, and now oversee several departments, some of them dealing intentionally with the work of equity and inclusion across the city, and others are doing city services such as 311 customer service, our ethics department, ethics and compliance, and our Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability, along with the Office of Equity and Inclusion, which consists of 5 divisions human rights, equity, resilience, welcoming communities and immigrant affairs, and fair housing. And so every day is a new day, every day is a challenge. And every day, as I think we're going to talk about, Ben, presents new opportunities for growth, both professionally and personally, but not without its challenges. So I'm looking forward to being in sort of a vulnerable space about talking about the challenges of equity and inclusion as we are newer to this work at the City of Dallas with 4 years now in the making. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague and new friend, Mr. Benjamin Duncan.
Hey, I appreciate that, and sorry for putting people on a little bit of stress this morning, trying to access the platform and all that. But it's really a pleasure to be able to share this space with you, Liz, and with all the folks here this morning. I think it's morning everywhere. It's 8 a.m. out here in Portland, Oregon, so it's a nice early start for me. But you know, I'll start with a little bit of background on myself, and then kind of dive into some thoughts and reflections. So I always start with kind of who I am. You know, my father is a Black man whose family from Alabama, part of the Great Migration north to Syracuse, New York, where I grew up. I'm a long way from home. My mother is a white Jewish woman from the Bronx. So we can talk about all the therapy, you know, and all that needed, you know, through the life. Excuse me. But I start there because it's actually framed and I think informed a lot of my work, not just my own. Oh, look at that! All right, Tammy, I see you. It's not only framed my kind of approach to work, right? That you know, it's exploration of identity. The exploration of how multicultural, multiracial movement building can happen, right? And as my friend, mentor, and brilliant colleague John Paul says, right, it's helped me understand how bridging can happen, right? And I think that's been an important part of the way I've approached work. So I moved to Oregon in 1997. Went to the University of Oregon after, I think you said, Liz, twists and turns. I had some twists and turns in my academic career, but I landed out here in Oregon. My background's actually environmental science, environmental justice, organizing work. So I cut my teeth as an organizer, came into government and environmental health, and kind of fell into DEI work, quite frankly. And it's always been this kind of examination of the relationship between kind of the systems and institutions and people's lived experience and lived environments. So I've been in with Multnomah County for 16 years, 7 years as the Chief Diversity and Equity Officer. This just went public a couple days ago, but I will be transitioning to go back to environmental consulting and environmental policy work. So you're going to get some truth telling today without any remorse. But it's been an incredible journey, and I think if I can leave, you know, some thoughts to y'all, that would be really helpful. So I do want to kind of focus on one area that I think is you know, one of those things that many jurisdictions will be exploring. And that's kind of the concept of kind of our workplace cultures and workplace environments. And I've of course, as I transition, and I think, you know, we can talk about this later, but, you know, when is the right time? How do you know? How do you create space for the next kind of leader to come in, the next visionary? And we can touch on that later. But, you know, I've been doing a lot of reflection, right? A lot of reflection of kind of the work we've been doing and how we've gotten there. And one of the things I really want to talk about is, you know, because we often say, you know, we got to look at get our own house in order, right? And I think for Multnomah County here in Portland, Oregon, that was a really important part of our equity work. And so, you know, going back to 2017, I was working with a group of folks, the Metropolitan Workforce Equity Coalition. We were really kind of gearing up to pass a resolution that would start a process of, you know, investing in workforce equity strategies. More or less at the same time, actually a really important person to me, was kind of pushed out of the organization, a Black woman, longtime community organizational leader. And we had hours of testimony from employees who showed up, right, at a public board meeting talking about their experience of racism, of discrimination, of kind of poor treatment, right? Hours and hours of folks saying this institution has been harming us, right? And in some ways, that was, I forgot who used the term crisis tunity, in this moment of kind of tragedy and pain. It really provided this opportunity for us to lean into our values, and to try to focus on these things of, really centering the voices, right? Really one of the core concepts of environmental justice, right? Communities speak for themselves, best protect themselves. Really leaning into the idea that we would center the voices of those who were most negatively impacted in our organization. And we had the data, right? Our employee surveys showed, people of color we're having worse outcomes based on their race. Our HR data was showing that, particularly Black folks were, several times more likely to not get through their first year as employees. And so what we were able to do, kind of leveraging that organizing that was happening in our institution and the pain and the anger, was to really partner with our employee resource groups, which we had brought a big, pretty strong infrastructure for. Our office kind of worked with them to hold listening sessions where we collected information and stories. We supported them with a evaluator who helped, these kind of frontline staff be able to evaluate their own data, to do analysis, to identify trends. And then we did strategy sessions, and we ultimately ended up working and building a workforce equity strategic plan that was really driven by our frontline employees, that focused on organizational culture, right? How do we do our work every day? What is the experience that people have when they walk through our organization? We focused on promotion and professional development, the opportunity to grow and advance in the organization or be the best where you are. We talked about retention. We have strategies. How do we, not just hire folks, but keep people here and retain good talent? And how do we build the pipeline to the future? So our workforce equity strategic plan hit those things. And finally, I'll just, so I'm really proud of that work, but and we are hitting our strategies. But I want to talk about kind of what that has meant, really briefly, what that has meant for our organization. Because I think, those, their standards, their strategies, there's nothing that's mind blowing in those. It's, give people good feedback, have diverse candidate pools, right? Train your staff and management, have competencies. But there were several dynamics that I think we are still confronting that really relate to how we do this work in our institution. One is we are really struggling with this idea of intersectionality, right? And recognizing, I think as many of us do, right, that there is compounding and cumulative harm when you start looking at the intersection of race and gender, and disability, and immigrant and refugee experiences, sexual orientation. And we've struggled. We talked about leading with race, and now we've talked about inclusively leading with race, and we've struggled. And one of the examples is, we often use pronouns in introductions. And we've had a lot of challenge with folks saying, oh, you're just trying to erase race by trying to have the dignity of making sure that folks are referred to in a way that is respectful and with dignity. And we've seen these sort of battles between kind of the lateral oppression between our folks. And even in our employee resource groups, we actually formed a queer and trans people of color group because they'd go to employees of color and they wouldn't be receptive to queer and trans identity. They'd go to PRISM, our LGBTQ group, and they wouldn't talk about race. And so we saw these real kind of divisions showing up in our organization. I think that's been a real challenge for us. And we've also had, as we talk about leading with race, and I'll, just to be very honest, right, we've had real challenges with folks. If you hire a white person, saying, well, how are you leading with race if you hired a white person, right? And so as we've been doing this, we've had a lot of challenges that have emerged. So I'm going to be quiet, but I think, there is so much challenge when you start moving this work forward, and we've been doing it for a decade and more. There's just so many things that show up. So Liz, I'll pass it to you, but I think, that's an introduction to kind of workforce and some of the challenges I think we will continue to see, and you will continue to see as you do this work.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I mean, you just got right into the layered complexities, I think, of the work, and it's quite real. So I appreciate you opening it up like that, and you've been at it for I think, as an institution, for a much longer period of time than we have at the City of Dallas. In fact, in earnest, as I said, about 4 years now. And I'm also going to put a footnote that I went to SMU Law School, Pony Up, and University of Pennsylvania, go Quakers, because I see that they were giving shout outs to you from where you went to school. So didn't want to lose that opportunity to recognize my alma maters. But really doing this work started when our city manager came to town, and he came from Tacoma, Washington, and with a very deep-rooted philosophy about the importance of centering equity and inclusion, and establish some values for us at the city on, which consisted of empathy, excellence, ethics, and inequity. Sort of a bow around the package, if you will, of how he thought from right outside the gate that he was going to center equity and make sure that that would be his legacy. He's building his legacy on this idea of equity, and it's not always it takes a lot of courage, I should say, to root your legacy in equity principles, because it does require that hard work. You started off with somebody who lost your position, and that's not ever an easy issue to get at. And in fact, I would say that while we're not nascent any longer, I think that we still have along the trajectory many phases to see moving forward. Thank you for the shout out to TC. He's a great boss. He's a great person to work with. He's just a wonderful human being. And early on, you sort of talked to me about lack of resource and told me, you're never going to have the resources that you think you need to get the work done that you need to get accomplished. And so don't be uncomfortable with that, I think, was his advice to me. But you can be influential in the sense that every department needs to be thinking about inclusion. Every program that we're doing needs to be layered in equity. And so use that sense of influence to connect with your peers, and together we can, start addressing these endemic issues that we have seen that are compounded, as you say, over generations, over decades, since we became incorporated as a city. I want to recognize our Native American population as I make that point, because this land was lived on by numerous Native tribes, Native nations, and no longer do we have that thriving population because of displacement, because of genocide, because of perhaps lack of community. But we're working on that, and we have very, very mighty but small American Indian population that is an incredible contributor to our community, and is now taking steps to pressure or put pressure on us to recognize the native name of our Trinity River, which runs through our city, to Archikosa, which is one of the native names that was used by the people who inhabited our lands prior to Dallas being incorporated. So, but really the equity in action is what we're trying to focus on. And we've seen some fruits of these labors so far. And one that I wanted to highlight just for starters is our planning department is doing, planning and urban design. So we have been a part of GARE, Government Alliance for Race and Equity, since we started. They have been to our city on numerous occasions with trainings and consultations, and all of our executive leadership and our directors have benefited from those trainings, and as well as now we have an equity core team as a recommendation of working with GARE. And so equity core team is members throughout the city who are at all stages, some managers, some supervisors, some directors, some assistant directors, just a very variety of diverse backgrounds that are included. And the equity team from the PUD department thought that they needed to step up, as a key part of their doing their own work in design and planning to take actionable change. And so really proud of what they've doing. They've started a working group called Equity in Action, and it's a series by their department. And it was developed outside of, in the wake of the killings of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and others. They said that they needed a safe space, to informally discuss important topics. And so they partnered with our team, the Office of Equity and Inclusion, our equity division, to bring their vision to reality. And that's how Equity in Action was formed. And so they meet every Friday now, and this group discusses topics like microaggressions, colorism, segregation, allyship, and many other issues. And the team also brought in internal and external speakers to provide expert advice and to lead discussions. So taking on a task like this does not come without its challenges, of course. So I wanted to lift it up, because this is sort of what we're talking about today, is the opportunities, or the crisis-tunities, which is a new word that I learned from you today, Ben, thank you, that these sorts of efforts can create. And through these meetings, they're widely received and well attended by staff. They have faced some opposition as they've communicated to us, and it's sometimes common when confronting implicit biases. Things can get uncomfortable, and some may reject the process, in fact. So they have received some of that rejection from some of their colleagues. And so what we want to do is support them and lift up that work. And now using them as a guiding force to establish other equity and action groups within other departments, so that they don't feel isolated in their efforts. And so that's where I wanted to start our conversation. And then I might turn it back over to you, Ben, to receive your response on that, and maybe go in a different direction or continue along these lines.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think I'll be boomeranging back to you, because one of the things that I'd be interested in your thoughts on, as you talk about, and I think we've done this, and many jurisdictions are doing this, right? We're both building infrastructure, right? And I think with that, and these teams like equity action teams and equity committees, with that becomes these expectations, right? About how we are going to transform our institutions, right? To deconstruct and dismantle and, undo white supremacy culture, right? We start getting the language, we start getting the momentum. I'm curious, like, where you see some of the opportunities happening. I think you talked about that, but I'm curious, like, your thoughts on kind of incremental and long-term change work, right? And I think we often talk about this work, right, as it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I think the more appropriate metaphor, it's like a long, it's like a relay, right? Where you're going to be passing the baton perhaps between generations. And I'm curious kind of like how you're having those conversations about meeting the expectations and the urgency of now and the reality that this is long-term incremental change. I'm curious if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. Am I here? Yes. Well, Gail Christopher said, it's 100 years work, right? Worth of work. It's not an initiative or a program or one policy. It took some years to get to where we are in terms of the disparities in outcomes, the racial disparities that we see, and the inequities that we're faced with. So I like to think that eventually I will, maybe even sooner than later, right, pass this baton, because frankly, it's tough work, and it takes a lot of energy and resilience, but again, it's worth it, I think, because I think I'm guided by what I think is my North Star, which is that you don't have to look too far to understand equity. As you pointed out in your introduction, your past and how you're rooted in the past and the complexities and living in intersections and being a bridge builder, if you will. And so, just if I might share, because I think this topic is one where you have to be a little bit vulnerable to talk about the realities of it. When I was in college away at University of Pennsylvania, first woman in my family to have the opportunity, the privilege to go to college. My mom was receiving letters from the city that they're going to tear her house down. And, I just couldn't get over the fact that, why this woman, this woman's working 3 jobs and, single parent and all of this that's associated being with a mom of color. And, it guides my work that when I see policies and presentations being made, that's my North Star. I see environmental injustice, or when I see, these urban blight type initiatives that not necessarily in my city, but, over generations, how we have really dismantled some issues, during the civil rights movement, but created other issues like deepening segregation and gentrification and displacement. And so I think that's where the opportunity is in terms of public policy is being centered in the people whom we are guided to serve. And it took me becoming an attorney and coming back and fighting with my mother on her behalf, but she saved her home. And that's the type of work that fuels me. It's like the justice component of the work fuels me. And when my tank is low, I just need take a break and then come back to it and realize that there's a purpose for us setting up an evictions initiative. There's a purpose behind us working to address the digital divide disparities that we find in our communities. There's a purpose for us to look at our planning and urban design in new and innovative and equitable. So those were, I think, some of the opportunities. What about you?
Sorry, my wife was like, I'm on a call. No, I appreciate that. I mean, there's a couple pieces that I'm really sitting with that you just talked about. I mean, I think in our early conversation as we were planning this, I talked a little bit about, bureaucracy was kind of built and meant to move slowly, right, and not be kind of quickly overturned, right, just by the nature of it. And I think it's been protective in some ways. And regardless of your politics, right, you follow either side of the aisle, you're like, oh, I'm glad that, you can't just come in and just change everything all at once, right? But I really am resonating. And as I said earlier, I think in this time of transition and it's like, how do you get out of bed in the morning in this work, right? And I really appreciated the way you talked about that North Star, right, and what drives you. And there's I sometimes butcher statistics and facts, but I will say, I think what I understand is the average is somewhere in 3 to 4 years for folks in these kind of chief equity officer type positions, and there's a reason for that. And when I look at 7 years in my role, it is draining, right? It's one of the things we celebrated and honored Loving Day in Multnomah County yesterday, and I had the great honor, as I do every year. I have some fashion with my family where we come the Loving v. Virginia decision, which that was the name of the family, the couple that got married. It banned or it eliminated bans on interracial marriage. So my family is a product and a benefit of the fight that the Lovings did. But one of the things I talked about and my family talked about was, the ways that we experience, and I think Lizzie said, talking about vulnerabilities. I'm going to talk about some of the harm and some of the challenges that I think I faced, while also trying to swing it back to kind of what gives me hope and gets me out of bed. Many of my colleagues have heard me talk about this, that there's times when you're in a room in my type of position and our type of positions where you're nothing but that, there's a black guy talking about racial equity again, nothing but kind of the person of color raising these issues. And there's other times where, you get erased, right? You're just a faceless bureaucrat that, people like, I've heard things like, folks haven't been black in years. Right, it's the old offensive term around the house Negro, right? You're just up there, with dancing with the electeds, doing the political thing. You ain't pushing, and I think it's hard. It's a hard thing to hold. When you have dedicated so much of your time and energy and so much of this work, and I think I'd be interested in hearing a little bit of this from you, Liz, too, is so much of this work is behind the scenes, right? It's that conversation you're having in the hallway, in the office, right? It's that phone call you make that starts moving the work. But it's invisible to a lot of folks, right? And I think, a place like Multnomah County, where we've made such progress, for many people, it's hard to sit with that, right? And I think for those of us in these roles, right, it's hard to sit with that kind of reality. It's like, you're not going to get the credit all the time. And you had to, as Liz was talking about, you had to be able to find some grounding, right? Partly for me, I have a little 10-year-old Black, Mexican, Jewish child. So that's a little shout out to my wife, Dr. Catherine Rodella, who's a brilliant educator at Washington State University in Vancouver. But, what gets me up is recognizing that, when I think about my father's struggle, when I think about, Rudy's future, right, knowing that the work that I'm doing now is going to make his life better, right? Knowing that, at the end of the day, I can look back and look in the mirror and say, I did my best today, right? I was interviewing with equity managers, so I was talking about infrastructure. I have equity managers in every department, right? It has a senior level equity manager, right, that has a dotted line relationship with my office of diversity and equity. We were interviewing someone. I said, listen, every day, people are going to be disappointed in you, right? People say you're pushing too hard, not pushing hard enough. It's like every day, right? People's expectations are not going to be met. I said, how do you deal with that? And she looked at me and she's like, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I lean on my faith, I lean on my family, and I lean on a vision for justice. Not for me necessarily, but for those that come behind me. She's like, I don't know if that's what you want to hear. I was like, sister, all I want to hear is that you have a strategy and you have something to sustain yourself. You could have told me you got to drink a glass of wine every night. That would have been fine too. I just need to know that you're going to be able to sustain in this work, because it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be hard. So I guess, maybe putting it back to was, not just what sustains you, because I think you really hit on that justice piece, but what keeps you up at night, right? What are those things that, maybe your city or your county, your region is dealing with that, is really that challenge that feels, almost intractable, or the thing that's just like, it's keeping you up at night.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, Ben. And thanks for sharing about your kid, because I think our kids keep us up at night. Some of us literally, I'm beyond that point. Mine are in high school now. But they keep you up at night for other reasons when they're in high school, right? And but really I think it's the next generation, right? Because I see our work at the city as foundational. And even though in our city form of government and in how we're organized, we have a county, and then we have a separate independent school system, and then it's the city overseeing municipal matters. I see, as we have talked about previously, the important work, and that you mentioned, Professor John Powell's bridging work is being a bridge for us to work together, because there's no way in my mind that we can really get at the systems change, get at these inequities. We have equity indicators now since 2019 that we published, and they're on our resilience website, so that we can hold ourselves accountable for, what we're facing. If we look at the odds, they're against us in terms of becoming a cohesive city that is integrated completely, and everybody has the resources and opportunities to thrive across zip codes. It's going to take us moving mountains, and moving mountains by working across different political divisions. And if I could just focus on one matter that's keeping me up right now, and that I'm very excited to be working on, is our bridging digital divide efforts, literally trying to create an infrastructure, a fiber infrastructure that will help us address the big disparities we have in communities where we know maybe have access because there's fiber or because there's cable, but don't have access because they can't afford it, or there's gaps in services. We're very blessed to have a thriving city where there is a lot of private investment. Our purpose right now is to fill those gaps, to invest in fiber infrastructure and accompanying building out a wireless network that connect residents, because we know that in this age, you can't thrive without a digital connection, right? And we've seen it now more than ever, right? We knew the numbers before our Federal Reserve put them out for us about how much disparity we have in terms of connectivity around our community. But now in real life, in real time, we've seen kids struggle, quite frankly, and our school system's doing, I think, yeoman's work to get them connected through hotspots, through distribution of hardware, through efforts to connect families, and the city's efforts as well. But it's going to take a large sum investment to really get at these issues. So the city manager punted the ball to equity inclusion, that you guys take the lead. And he could have, frankly, punted it to public works. Frankly, makes a lot of reasonable public works, since it's an infrastructure project. But his emphasis was so much on this bridging disparities, addressing gaps, looking at inequities, that he wanted our office to lead that charge. And of course, we're working with our IT department, we're working with public works, we're working with our library systems, working with our city attorney's office, all the department heads that need to be there. But it is such an important matter from an equity standpoint that he said, you guys lead that. So we've presented this week to our Workforce Education and Equity Committee. We have an incredible strategic consultant in it's widely known, has done work all over the nation addressing these root cause issues, and presented it to the school board yesterday. And we're publishing the draft report on our respective websites next week, and hopefully getting the dollar investment that we need from our policymakers to make those investments. So it's kind of some good work that we're doing from an equity standpoint that I think is very promising when you start looking at these public policy concerns, starting with equity, solving for equity, then you can really get at the root cause of the issue, I think. What about you?
It's a good question. My initial answer is I sleep like a baby. I just lights out. I'm down. No, but there's so much that I think I'm sitting with. I mean, part of the reason that I'm going back to my roots in environmental work is because I see how much our lived environments are impacting population outcomes. When I think about the work that we're doing around kind of reimagining our criminal legal system, when I think about the work that's happening around climate change, when I think around about the work that's happening around air toxics, in Oregon, we like much of the country is in drought, which will probably continue. Klamath Basin in southern Oregon. The water wars have existed for a long time. And this year we're not releasing irrigation water, right? So that means that, tribes are looking for access to first foods and, the cultural importance of salmon and other species means that ranchers and farmers aren't going to have water for their needs. It means that people that use our waterways, are going to be impacted. So there's just all these things that are going to keep me up at night and that I've sat with for a long time. But I think in our institution, Oregon, Portland, Oregon's. I think we battle with Salt Lake City for the whitest metropolitan city in the United States. And I think one of the things that I alluded to this a little bit at the beginning, but I think one of the things that really is a challenge for us, right? I think Van Jones called it the white lash, right? For every effort that you do around racial equity, there's this white lash that kind of comes in response. And I think one of the things that I have, in a lot of ways really struggled with, and I think for a place like Oregon and a place like Portland, like how do we build structures for our kind of white siblings, right, to participate in this work, right? And folks are honest with us. I mean, we get our employee survey and folks will be like, there's the nonsense comments. I'm not going to lift those up. But, folks saying, I'm concerned that I might not have a place here. I'm concerned I might not be able to get a promotion. I'm concerned that I don't know how to do equity work. I'm concerned I'm going to mess it up and there's going to be a complaint. I might get fired, right? There's real concerns for folks around racial equity work that I think we need to account for, and we don't do well. Just to be honest, right? We don't do it well. And quite honestly, there's a lot of white folks that don't do it well, and can create a lot of harm. But I think one of the things that I leave for my successors is that opportunity, right? We built a lot of infrastructure. We got all the language, we got all the frames, we got the strategies and the plans. I think what really will be the future of our work, all the stuff in community, of course, right? Racial disparities in criminal justice and education, housing, right? That work is core work. And I think we have a strong focus. But I think as an institution, our organizational culture, right? How do you navigate as our expectations are changing, right? And I was talking to a colleague, and I'm not that old, but I was like, man, sometimes I just feel like an old boomer, like get off my lawn, yelling, like work is hard, it's not supposed to be fun. You're not going to get therapy at work. We're not going to heal your trauma, right? And at the same time, I think those are things that we have to hold and recognize, is that people are coming into our institutions with different expectations, right? We're not going to see the 30-year folks, right? You have folks that are like, I'm here, I want to grow and advance, I want to, get my skill sets, and maybe I'm going to go somewhere else. You have folks that are coming and saying, I have a different expectation about what my experience is supposed to be every day. I was watching I'll say this and I'll be quiet. I was watching the Anderson Cooper interview with Obama. And one of the things President Obama said was, part of his legacy is there's a whole generation that came of age during that time that have different expectations about our society, which I absolutely agree with. And I think that causes a lot of problems in our organizations, right? Because our organizations are kind of built on these, systems of, dominant culture, white supremacy culture, whatever the language you want to use. And so as we try to transform, that's going to mean a lot of things to different people. And that's, for me, that's the biggest challenge. It's we're seeing folks get activated on our streets that are coming into the institution and trying to bring those same tactics. We're going to organize, we're going to advocate, and I think that's going to be something that will keep a lot of people up at night, right? How do you seize the energy of folks that are really activated and energized to transform the way we look and feel and operate in government, and the pace of change, as we talked about earlier. So I'll stop there. I know I think there's a couple comments in the chat maybe, but I want to make sure, Liz, if there's anything else you wanted to add.
I'm happy to. I don't know if Tammy has seen anything that
I
she
have
wants us to
actually.
look at.
Yep, we have a few questions that have come up with folks. And Ben, since you lobbed the mic over to me, I'm going to bring up, I have three right now. The first one that I received earlier in the discussion was one of our participants is curious about whether either of you can talk about the approaches and impacts that also consider generational differences in the workplace.
You want to take that, Liz?
I'll punt it to you, and then I'll make some comments thereafter. I know that it's an important issue, and frankly, we have gone through this process for 2 years now, our budgeting for equity process, and so all of our departments are now required to integrate questions and responses related to budgeting for equity using desegregated data, looking at communities and how their budgets before enhancement requests, before reductions, is being utilized to serve our community in an equitable manner. And so all 40 departments are now participating, including our human services department, our civil service departments, et cetera. But again, I would love to take that question next year, maybe if we get invited back. This is a great forum, by the way. Thank you, ICMA, for doing this, because we've been focusing on big chunks, as Ben said. There's many plans, many departments, but we have not looked exclusively yet at how people are faring in their places, looking at data related to, as an Office of Equity and Inclusion, I'm sure our HR department is doing it. I'm sure our civil service department is doing it. But we are just getting our hands around the big, broad budget components, and then maybe in year 5, hopefully, be able to look at developing strategies along some of these departments to look to see how people are faring, not only from a race, ethnicity, gender, intersecting points such as status of LGBTQ, other protected statuses, and age, to see how well we're doing in those regards. But I look forward to that work. It's definitely on our whiteboard of work that is important and work that we need to address collectively.
Yeah. Liz, it sounds like what you've just said, I'm hearing echoes of something we talk about when we're doing equity work. We're leading with race, But as a result of that, so many other groups are also benefited from the work that is done. And ultimately, the goal is equity and support for all. So that is a very important point, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I have another question here, and this question references something that Ben spoke about earlier. Ben had talked about getting pushback for hiring the white guy, and the writer is asking, what is the best response? The inclination is to justify the hire by listing qualifications, but that really doesn't address the opposition. So they're curious about lessons that you've learned around responding to this type of pushback.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and trying to think about it. I mean, I could probably talk about this for 3 to 4 hours, but I'll try to hone in. I actually had an employee who had that conversation with me, and what we talked about, right? Because ultimately, it was starting to border on what could be, in opposition to personnel rules, right? Right. Saying, the way he was talking about it. What I told him is like, I told this individual what we need to do, rather than critiquing the individual or that hiring decision, right? Because I think, as a civil service process, right, it does get to qualifications and things like that. I was like, let's examine the process, right? Let us examine the candidate pools. Let us examine the type of questions we use. Let's examine the interview panels that we have. Let's examine ways we can mitigate bias, right? Because at the end of the day, right, I think part of the critique is like, are we really leading with race if a white person gets hired? And I was like, well, damn, that's a bad analysis. That is not what we're talking about, right? Especially in a city like this, right? But I do think that by focusing on some of those other pieces, like, so one of the examples, is we've done a lot of work to, right, like, how do you provide the opportunity without saying like, are you Black, you get 5 points, right? Are you Latinx, you get 5 points, right? Are you gay, lesbian, trans, you get 5 points, right? What we have been able to do, though, is ask folks and introduce the opportunity for people to talk about their background and lived experience as it relates to the job, as it is a qualification for the job, right? So saying, how does your background and lived experience, contribute to the way you approach this role? And it allows people to say, as a person of color, right? As a trans person, as a person with a disability, right? Fill in the blank. It allows us to then actually score background and lived experience in a way that maybe we weren't before. And, at the end of the day, it's okay to critique the process, right? But it doesn't mean it didn't work if you hire a white person, right? And I think that's where, our caution, and part of the work that we've done to say inclusively lead with race, because I think we want to understand the compounding and cumulative impacts of multiple systems of oppression, really building off, Kimberly Crenshaw's work. We kept seeing this over and over again, right? That folks were taking this really narrow view of what we meant. And it doesn't mean that like, we're never going to hire white folks, right? And so, what I've always tried to counsel folks is, we're not going to let's not look at the individual. Let's take it up and look at our structures and processes. If you're looking for a different type of outcome, right, let's look at our structures and processes to give maybe inherent advantage, if you will, to folks who share backgrounds with many of the clients that we serve every day. But at the end of the day, it still is civil service. We cannot discriminate based on race. And so, we kind of go through all those pieces, right? There's the legal piece, there's the ethical piece, and there's the process and procedures.
All right, excellent. And with about 6 minutes remaining, I have 3 really good questions. So I'm gonna challenge you to see if you can keep your responses to 90 seconds as you respond to them. Good luck. The first one that I want to share, internal and community equity efforts bring to light ways we're falling short in our organizations and communities, which can be embarrassing and increase the likelihood of legal claims. How do you help elected officials and the city organization persist anyway? And go.
You go first, Ben.
I don't have a good answer. I mean,
You put that
know,
90 seconds and it really, is very pressure oriented now.
yeah. No, I don't have a good answer. I mean, Multnomah County, we've been doing this work for a long time, and you can't get elected in Multnomah County if you're not talking about equity. But I think it costs money sometimes. That's it. I don't know. I mean, that's a whole nother session about how do you work with elected officials. So I don't have a good answer. I'm going to pass it back to you, Liz.
I just say it starts with leadership. I started out by talking about our city manager, TC Broadnix. He centered equity work in his, and everybody knows that it's his one of his legacy items. He wants to be known as moving and advancing equity in the city of Dallas. When at the end of the day, he's no longer here, and so with that determination and that leadership, you find ways to set up governance structures around it, and that certainly is important for sustainability of the work. I created the Office of Equity and Inclusion. We have a resilience strategy which calls out equity as paramount to building our resilience in the city. March 24th, the City Council passed unanimously a resolution, racial equity resolution, affirming our principles of centering race and ethnicity and equity in our policies and procedures and our procurement processes and the like. And with that, called the city manager to develop a racial equity plan, which we'll be getting to work on, over the next few months and into the new year. So that's one way, is to make sure that you have the leadership in order. Our mayor established a workforce education and equity committee. So it's our city staff working in tandem with our policy leaders to create the infrastructure, the governance processes to make the work sustainable over time.
Okay, excellent. You did it. I had a question also that came to me privately, and this approaches the equity conversation from a slightly different angle from what we typically see. The person writes, there's so much work to be done in this space, especially from the lens of HR and hiring. I'm seeing real pushback, perhaps fear, on hiring the best candidate who may have a, quote, disability and may need a reasonable accommodation. It feels like the disabled are less represented at the DEI table. Your thoughts?
I will just say this and hand it over to Ben, is that we felt the need to address these issues as well. And within our Office of Equity and Inclusion, created a standalone division over the last year called Human Rights. And our Human Rights Division is looking to set out a strategy related to our ADA policies and procedures, and to ensure that not only externally are we addressing those key components of the law, but also internally, how are we creating a culture where everyone can thrive? Because like Ben said, as you get to work in this space, you start beginning to see the intersections and you start to see where there's gaps, and you start to address new issues, et cetera. And so I agree that those are challenges that we should not be overlooking, and that we should be addressing alongside of our other equity and inclusion initiatives. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I'll just say really briefly. I was like, my first response is like, well, that person probably shouldn't have a job if they're thinking about that. But I think we actually a couple years ago did a report on equity and accommodation needs for people with disabilities within our organization, and just last year created our first position within our office that's exclusively focused on disability community. So that's not just accommodations, but it looks at recruitment and hiring practices and investments that we can make, partnerships that we can make. And so, I think we really recognize that. I think we've battled with this for years. We still are not. I know we had a story with a woman who was blind, who couldn't access a very specific system that she needed to use to do the work, and ultimately she was an intern, but ultimately was not able to really be successful because we didn't have systems that work for her. And that's problematic. And at the same time, right, I think we have both a moral and legal obligation to ensure that our institutions are accessible. I mean, it seems like it shouldn't even have to be said, But if folks are debating the idea that it's going to cost money because we have to, go through accommodations, or it's going to be, an extra burden, I mean, I don't have much to say other than it disgusts me, that kind of language and thinking. It's our obligation to ensure that folks can thrive, as you were just saying.
Absolutely. And with that, we have come to the close of our time today. I want to thank you, Ben and Liz, for your insight today, for your sharing from your experiences, from your heart and your passion for this work. I want to thank everybody who took time to come out here today. There was one other question we weren't able to get to, so I'm going to see if we can snag that and see if we can get an answer for you. If you have additional questions that may come up following this session, please send them to speakup@icma.org. We have additional sessions in today's ICMA Equity Summit. Please feel free to avail yourself. We look forward to seeing you, and the recording will be available after Monday next week. Thank you very much.
Come visit us in Dallas.